Welcome to the Non-Standard Podcast. I'm your host, Manny Lamson. If this is your first time listening or your 50th time listening, this is what to expect on this episode. We dive into the concepts of developing your leadership toolbox. Why do you need this? You need this in any situation to help manage, lead, and control, and ultimately win. How do you do that? You can't use the same form of leadership in everything you do. So every episode, we dive into my leadership philosophy. We dive into the story and the background of the person we're talking to. And we also dive into some leadership traits I have accrued throughout the years. And then we also follow it up with a book review at the end. So you're getting a wide range of leadership topics and traits that you can add to your kit. So without further ado, let's go into the recap of this episode. And afterwards, if you love it, like it, share it, follow it, give us some feedback because we're only just getting started. What's up, everybody? We are flipping back with another episode, and I am always humbled on every episode. And this one, I could not have been more humbled. There was a lot of work to get this one done, halfway across the world. It was phenomenal. So I'm joined with Brigadier General Palenske. He is the 36th Wing Commander at Andersen Air Force Base in Guam. And just a little backstory on him. Again, he enlisted in the Army as a helicopter maintenance crew chief, and then worked into a warrant officer in helos, went to OTS in the Air Force, transitioned to a helo pilot, has over 3,500 hours, multiple deployments. And the main reason I reached out to him is pretty simple. He has a Facebook page, and he's very social on it. And so one of my airmen was like, hey, man, you need to go contact him. He seems social. He seems cool. Go hit him up. What do? I just message him on Facebook. Hey, sir, here's my story. Would love to get you on my show. And he says, yes, I work through his staff. It takes a couple months to do, but we do it. And that's what I love about this journey. If you just go out there and do it, most likely you'll get it done. A lot of people just don't take that first initiative to go and do it. So that being said, let's get the show on the road. I hope you enjoy the episode. And if you have any questions, please share, like, save, follow, do whatever you can, because we're only getting started and we're almost done with year one. So let's go. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Non-Standard Podcast. I'm very humbled and excited for this episode. And, sir, I'll tell you right away, the way I found out about you is I followed your Facebook page, and an airman of mine follows it, and he goes, Manny, you need to get him on your podcast. He's social just like you. He works with airmen. He shows what's going on. I was like, I don't know how to do that yet, so let me just see what I can do. And I've learned through just this process, you just got to ask, and the worst that can happen is no. But it all worked out and we're here. And I just want to say thank you for your time.
Yeah, Manny, I want to say thank you. It's a great opportunity. I can't say that I've seen your podcast, but I'm definitely going to look it up right after this so I can see some of your other recordings. I'm looking forward to it. I know you want to talk about leadership a little bit, so I'm looking forward to that. But I'll start off with my Facebook on how you found me. So I initially did the Facebook thing when I was a wing commander at Hurlburt Field, and it turned out to be an excellent way to connect with the airmen and also to find out things that people weren't going to readily tell me. A lot of things that I find out that's going on the base, I get from spouses. So, spouses, I get one where a spouse wants a speed bump somewhere. I'm like, oh, why not give her a speed bump? It's not that big of a deal. Or, maybe the pool's unexpectedly closed, and I learn about that. So, and what I normally do, let me ask you this. Let me ask you a question before I start. Do you know what a general officer does for a living?
I can't say I've learned that much about that high up yet.
Yes. Well, you want me to show it to you?
That'd be great, yeah.
Yeah, so all day long, people bring me work. And I look at that work, and I'm like, man, that's some really great work right there. Keep up the good work. Or sometimes I'm like, that work needs a little bit more work. That's it. That's my full contribution to national security is looking at other people's work. So to break through, because I don't really do anything, to break through the barriers between me and the people that do work, who do you think does work in the Air Force?
Man, it all starts for all those airmen down there turning the wrenches is one of the easiest expressions out there. So. Yeah,
I like to kind of draw the analogy that that sergeants are kind of like the steering wheel of the wing, but the airmen are the engine. The airmen are the things that actually do real work and make it go forward. So the goal of the Facebook is to try to figure out where I can help them with the power that I've got to enable them to do that work more efficiently, or empower them to change the way the work's done, enable them to change their work environment, because they're the only guys and gals that really know what's going on out there. So that's kind of the goal, is to use that Facebook as a means of communication, break down some barriers. I think a lot of people are more comfortable IMing me on my Facebook page than they are sending me a formal email. So it's just enables communication. So you want to talk about the 4-H's to start out. I think you must do that with all your guests. So my hometown is Topeka, Kansas. I pretty much grew up there most of my life. I did spend some of my early years in Hutchinson, Kansas before we moved up to Topeka. And I graduated from Topeka West High School, although I didn't really attend high school that much. I was kind of the guy that lied about his age and then was slinging drinks over Bennigan's as opposed to being in class. But it turned out I tested pretty well. So that's my hometown. I'd say for hardships, if that's the next one, my life's been pretty blessed. I mean, I'm sure there's hardships out there. We grew up pretty poor, and that took a long time and a long path to get here. But let me ask you a question about hardships, I guess. You're a major in the Air Force, bone wizzo. So I imagine you got 3 kids. I imagine you've had to make some pretty consequential decisions in your life, right?
There's been quite a few. Just recently, I was trying to cross-train the TACP officer, so that was a huge decision for my family and I to talk about. If I were to get selected, what would that journey be like? Obviously, deployments are another huge hurdle where we can't control those, but it's part of the job. Just flying in general, as far as that timeline, that consistency, and that schedule. My wife and I, we joked last week, we did a workout together on base around our track with the baby. And that is a time we had to schedule together because, at the house, sometimes with kids, it's just tough to communicate like that.
It's crazy.
And so one of the hardships we have found is where do we get that parent time to talk? And that's what we threw in.
Yeah, I'd say that's the same. When I look back and think about hardships, and I think I've deployed somewhere in excess of 20 times as a special operations helicopter pilot. I didn't really feel like it was a hardship at the time. I was out fighting war. It was awesome. But looking back as a 56-year-old man, I really missed out on a lot of things with my kids. My son's last 2 years in high school, he played football since the time he was about 7 years old. And there's nothing else. You got 2 sons, right?
2, yes. And then my son is just now starting football. My oldest.
So I can tell you right now, as a proud football father, there is nothing better than watching your kid destroy somebody else's kid on the football field. It's the best feeling ever. So I missed out on his last 2, the second half of his last 2 high school football years because I was in Afghanistan. So I regret that. So I'd say in terms of hardship, I'd put most of it on the things that I missed out on watching my awesome kids grow up, which is just the price that a lot of us pay for service. So yeah, that's the thing I probably regret the most. There's also a lot of.
I'll add on.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll add on, sir. I think it's, I've come to realize there's an expression that they say deployments get easier, but I don't think they do. I've done only 3, and I thought this last one I did by myself with my kids being older was going to be easier because they realized it. But it was harder because, like you said, there's those moments that are just getting more and more for those kids. First time in the sports games, when my first 2 deployments, my son was 3 and under. So, I missed a lot of those baby days, which, I'm very blessed with now for Cooper to be a little bit younger, and I try to idolize those more. And so now I tell a lot of people, capitalize on the time you get because the military won't give you time off. It'll take your time because that's what we signed for. So when you get that time, you have to capitalize on it.
100%.
You have to be vocal about picking up your kids if you can, or eating lunch, just those little things. Because like you said, they'll, when you look back, you want to make sure you have those things in line to continue to do what you got to do.
Yeah, I think you're smarter than I am, or certainly smarter than I was when I was your age. Because oftentimes I would voluntarily take deployments just because I like fighting war so much. And now when I look back, it was great being downrange with the guys. But when I look back, I traded some pretty important moments for things that didn't turn out to be as important as I thought they were. So that's probably the biggest hardship. For hero, it's kind of odd to say this, but when I was a second lieutenant flying M860s in the 55th Special Operations Squadron, I had a guy that was a captain. The guy's name's Captain Lee Apollo. He retired as a colonel and then became an SES for FEMA, I think. But that guy was my hero. I mean, when I first got there, he was a flight commander. And it appeared that all of the power in the squadron was in that flight and with that flight commander. He wasn't even my flight commander. so I figured, maybe the flight commander is the most powerful job in the squadron. And then he moved over to OGV, to Stanival, and then all the power was in Stanival. So it turns out that the power was in that guy and not the position, which I thought was pretty awesome. So I learned a lot from Captain Lee Apollo. And I'd say he's still probably one of my biggest heroes.
I'll piggyback on what you said a little bit earlier about your Facebook page for the recognizing your airmen. And that's one thing I think we can do better at, is appreciating those that do the job. There's a lot of, research behind just small appreciations throughout the day, be it acknowledgments, what is it? Praise in public, criticize in private is a big expression. And so for you to share that on your page means so much to those airmen. It's night and day, like just for me, when I get to work out with airmen or do the little steps like that, I can see it where to me, it's just another workout, but for them, it may be one of the hardest workouts they've ever done, or working out with an officer or working out with someone they don't know. And it just goes so much further down the road.
Yeah, 100%. So I've been accused of being a little bit too liberal with coining people. So I probably give out 3 or 4 coins a day. Anytime a defender asks me for a post brief, if there's any possibility that I have the time to take that post brief, which is most of the time, I take the post brief. And I always give them the coin at the end of it to show that how much I appreciate, 1 striper, 2 striper out on the line. And so my coin is the coolest coin in the world. Do you want to see it?
Yes, I do. Oh my gosh!
So it looks like that on the on one side, and looks like they have the patch on the other side. You got any idea what that shape is?
It looks like a bottle opener. I'm not sure.
That's an old school razor blade. So, and the reason why the reason why we picked the razor blade is you can see with the writing on there. Welcome to the forward edge.
So there we go.
So the people like the coin. I've been accused of giving out a lot, but I agree with you that sometimes the difference between an airman staying in or airman having a good day or bad day is just a small little token, little recognition from somebody that actually knows what they do for a living. So let me ask you this: have you ever been in uniform walking into Walmart and someone goes, "Hey, thanks for your service"?
Funny, yep.
Yeah. What do you say back?
I say thank you because I appreciate it. It takes a lot for them to go out of their way, and that may be the only person they ever see in the military.
And so what I've started saying back now is you're worth it to the people that thank me for my service. So yeah. And I believe it. So, but do you think those people got any idea what we really do for a living?
No.
So one of the things I tell my airmen probably every time I speak, I pretty much get up there and say, "Hey, thank you guys. Thank you for being the 0.4% of Americans that put on a uniform of any branch of service. Thanks for having the minerals and the skills and the patriotism to make the series of cuts they had to make to get there." I mean, do you have any idea how many people what percentage of the American population can get to the MEP station?
I know it's declining every year.
Yeah, it's about 30%. So 70% of America's fighting age men and women can't even get through the MEP station. And you went through a commissioning source, right? Did you go to the academy, or did you go to ROTC, or where'd you commission?
I did ROTC at Washington State.
Okay, yeah, my son did ROTC at University of West Florida. Did everybody that you started with make it through ROTC?
Nope.
You made that?
Even that was about maybe 60% only.
Yeah. So you made that cut, and then you became a WIZO. Did everybody make it through WIZO school? Nope. Yeah. So when you're thinking about airmen and thinking about how awesome they are, you got to kind of put it in context of the selection process and the series of cuts they had to make, and then mix that with the desire to serve. I bet that creates a bunch of pretty special people, whether they're wearing a patch on their chest with no stripes, or whether they're wearing 4 stars. It's just a good series of cuts. So I think they deserve everything we can give them.
All right, sir. If you want, we'll dive right into my leadership philosophy. So I talk about it on every episode, and the intent is to show people out there who are listening, we're all leaders. It's just understanding when and where to apply these leadership traits. So I developed this leadership philosophy. Actually, I just started ACSC, and one of the first classes you take is like a leadership class, and it asks you, you're about to take command, you have a couple minutes, how do you tell everybody what you do? And I was like, oh man, this is pretty cool. Right up my alley. I love this. And so my 4 are: lead by example in all you do. To be selfless, you have to be selfish. Build relationships based off trust and care, and then challenge the road in front of you, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. And it's sort of in a pyramid. You have to primarily start with the top to work your way down. And then those are my top 4. And then I have some key ones that follow on later on. So with that being said, first glance, what are some you like? What are some examples of what you've seen in the past with those? And how could airmen get better at these?
So I got a bit of a leadership philosophy of my own. You want to hear it?
Oh, yes, sir.
So I'd start off with this, is that, I started a business, so I'm doing pretty well financially. I got 3 great kids, so life's going pretty well. But when we die, none of that stuff goes with you. And I think the only thing that you take with you in your death is the positive impact you make on other people throughout your life. So I concentrate on trying to vector everything I do to create a positive impact on other human beings that I'm around. And I think in doing that, that's where you really make your mark on the world, is the positive impacts you make on the people around you. And then specifically to my leadership style, I got 3 things that I focus on. The first one is you got to make sure everybody in your formation believes in their heart that what they're doing is important, right? So I'll give you an example. So when I was a wing commander at Hurlburt, we had a mission brief, like a welcome to the wing mission briefing that I gave as the vice. And my slideshow is nothing but pictures of airmen. There's no words on it, just picture after picture of airmen. And they were airmen that were currently serving in the wing, and I'd bring them up to the office, and I'd get to know them, kind of learn their stories and where they came from. And I'd go through probably about 10 or 12 different pictures of airmen, and through that, tell what the mission of the wing is, because the airmen are doing the mission anyway. One of those pictures was of a guy that was a CV-22 tail gunner. So he was an FE, but he's flying on the tail for this particular mission. And they were in Djibouti when they got called upon to fly all the way to Sudan. I don't know if you know, but Africa is a pretty big place, pretty long trip from Djibouti to Sudan. So they saddled up 3 CV-22s, put a bunch of SEALs in the back as the ground force, and they were going to fly to a village in Sudan to rescue a bunch of diplomats that were getting ready to be overrun by rebels. So they took off, and they were heading out there. But what they didn't know is that the day before, the rebels apparently had helicopters, but they flew over this village they were going to pass over and shot the village up like a drive-by helicopter shooting, killed a bunch of people. So as the CV-22s transitioned back into helicopters and flew over that village, a bunch of villagers came out in a big mob and lit them up. The first aircraft had 108 holes shot through it. The second aircraft had about 46 holes shot through it. And the other one had in the mid-20s. So all 3 aircraft took battle damage. And this guy, the picture that I had when I'm talking to the folks about being important, about why their job is important, he was sitting there looking over the barrel of a 50 cal into this big mob of people with tracers and stuff coming up at him. And I asked him, I said, "Hey man, why didn't you shoot?" And he said, because he's got a 50 cal with explosive bullets. He said it was a mob of women and children with men shooting at it from that mob. And he said he's not going to fire a 50 cal into a mob full of women and children. He's not going to do it. So that's the last thing he saw for a 7.62 round. Went up through the ramp and hit him right about here, and it caught him in his body armor. Right, so it blew him back past the ramp hinge. And when he came up, there was blood everywhere, and the airplane was leaking fuel all over him. And he looked down. Actually, first off, he got on comm, gave the battle damage assessment to the pilots who were fighting to keep this thing in the air. That's the one with the 108 hole shot through it. And he looked down, and there's a SEAL that had a wound in his leg, and it was an arterial bleed. So it nicked his artery, and his femoral artery, I guess it is. So the CV-22 FE immediately pulled his tourniquet off, went down, tourniqueted off that SEAL's leg, and they fought probably an hour and a half to keep the airplanes flying to get back to Entebbe in Sudan, where they found an airplane, transloaded the injured folks, and flew them off. So the reason why I tell that story is when you're talking to your airmen, you got to make sure you can figure out a way to paint the picture in a believable fashion. It can't be like a used car salesman. You can't be like, "You're important and you're important." You got to tell a story that links them to the importance of their mission. So the first thing I'd say is you guys got aircrew flight equipment airmen in the bone, don't you? AFE folks?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah, so in the CV-22 world, the AFE folks are the ones that put your body armor together to make sure that it's all put together exactly right. So somewhere in the formation, we'll never know who this airman is. The airman that put together that guy's body armor and his flight kit probably saved his life. And then let me ask you this: where do you think an airman learns how to do a tourniquet properly? in the Air Force?
Ooh, man. Probably either through CBT or a one-time TCCC class now. So,
Yeah, so it's TCCC, right? Who
hmm
teaches treat? Who teaches treat
yes, sir.
TCCC for you guys?
Or if you go through a course, so somebody
Yeah,
volunteering it.
yeah, it's somebody from the medical group, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so somewhere out in
Yep.
the formation, there's a medic that taught that CB-22 engineer how to do exactly the right thing in that instance, and resulted in saving that SEAL's life, because that guy would have definitely been dead. He would have bled out. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about trying to make sure the people in your formation understand that their job is super important. The second thing I like to focus on for my leadership style is you got to make sure everybody in your formation has the opportunity to be the master of their craft. So you got to make sure that the training opportunities are not biased in any way, and that everybody has the opportunity to be the master of their craft. Not everybody's going to be the master of their craft, and some of them don't have the motivation. But let me ask you, how do you know when you're an airman that you've mastered your craft?
For what I remember, there's usually a checkbox or a task or something you have to complete to move up to the next level.
Yeah, that's just getting up at that. How do you know when you've truly mastered your craft? I mean, as a bone wizzo, how do you know?
For me, it'd be if I can just get in the jet comfortably and do what I got to do in a stressful situation and run the basics.
I'd say I'd say that you know that you're the master of your craft when the most important bone mission comes up, and they
Yeah.
ask you to fly on it. They say, "Hey, we need the best, so you're the master of your craft. I want you on this mission," and you get pulled in. So at the critical point of need for your particular skill set, when that time comes, if you get your name called, then you've mastered your craft. And everybody in the formation has to have the opportunity to do that, or otherwise you're wasting potential. So I'll tell you this, and I probably shouldn't say it, but I will. I don't really care what race you are. I don't care what gender you are. I don't care who you choose to love. I don't care about any of that stuff. All I care about is ensuring everybody has the opportunity to be the best airman they could possibly be. So that's the second one. And the third one's pretty easy. Don't micromanage people. You ever been micromanaged?
Plenty of times.
Yeah, it's pretty annoying, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, first of all, it certainly invalidates the first two, because you're certainly not the master of your craft if you're being micromanaged, and what you're doing is maybe so important now that they won't even let you do it on your own, which is completely demotivating and is not helpful. Um, and I'd say this: if you got a leader that's micromanaging you, why do you think they do that?
They're probably not doing as much as they should be doing outside of that. So,
I'd say that if you got a leader that's micromanaging their subordinates, it's because they're an uncomfortable leader. I mean, they haven't mastered the craft of leadership if they have to micromanage other airmen. Um, let me ask you this: do you trust me?
I trust you. I've seen what you do. We've talked. We're building trust.
Yeah, but you don't really even know me, do you?
I don't know. It's
'Cause I mean, I could be completely insane. So let me ask you this: I talked about where I'm from. Where are you from?
I was born in Germany. My dad was in the Air Force. Met my mother over there. So I lived there for 2 years when I was little. Grew up in Northern California, a small town. My whole life until I enlisted. Moved to Washington State in Spokane. Lived there for 8 years. Then Pensacola, Florida for CISO school, and now we call Dallas, Texas home. Basically, that's where our kids are raised.
Yeah. So yeah, that makes sense. And what's your dad was in the Air Force? What do you do in the Air Force?
He was an ammo troop.
Ammo troop. All right, being ammo. You know what I'm saying? So, and is your mom German?
She is. She's full German.
Okay, you speak German?
Unfortunately, we don't. When my mom came to the States with my dad, she was very proud, I say, to become an American. So she wanted to learn as much English as possible. And so that was her forte. She didn't want to sort of walk around and know German. She wanted to know English. And so when we grew up, we were primarily teaching her English to help her become a
Oh, I
citizen.
got you. Makes sense. Then, you got brothers and sisters?
One brother, he's up in Portland, Oregon right now. He's just got a new job as a athletic director for a school in East
Oh,
Oregon.
nice.
So
Very cool. So let me ask you this. There's a chance that right now I may know more about you than your immediate supervisor.
that is for sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
and how unfortunate is that? So I would
So
argue.
that is yeah.
Go ahead.
That is a huge trait I've tried to bring to airmen now with what I've learned is that mentorship key that mentorship should be more of that personal relationship. Supervisor is a very tough term, but what I've seen in the flying community is a lack of that. And it takes time, but that's what I try to push to a lot of airmen. That's why I try to get to know them with workouts. I try to meet them where they can, lunch with them, do these things most people don't do, because that's where you get to know them. You get to, like, I've went on 24-mile walks with airmen for 6 to 8 hours, and I got to know their whole life story, and we're still friends this day where, like you said, I could probably ask them, does your supervisor know that about you? They're probably like, no.
Yeah, it took me 30 seconds to learn more about you than your supervisor has known. He's probably been in charge of you for a year or so. So let me ask you this question. If you don't trust someone, can they change the way that you perceive the world at all?
I don't think so without trust.
Yeah, I don't think so either. So I'd argue that another leadership style type thing is, hey, the first thing you need to do is build a relationship based on trust with your subordinates. And if you do that, then you can maybe shift their perception of the way the world works, maybe a few degrees. And if you can shift it to align with your mission and your priorities, then you really don't got to lead them that much. They share a common vision with you based on a relationship built in trust, and then you can just get out of their way and watch the magic happen. So when I'm thinking about leadership, I kind of think about that aspect of it too. It's the complete opposite of micromanagement, like hyper empowerment.
I've said it on a few of my episodes. There are so many problems I've looked at in the military that could have been solved by just basic trust of that airman with people around him. Where, I'm not saying airmen, anybody that makes a mistake, there's probably something in the back of their mind preventing them from making that mistake. If they had somebody that cared about them, had somebody that knew what they were doing, they had trust in people around them. And when they don't care, that's usually where those small mistakes happen, but they become so large.
You're right.
And so taking that time to just show those airmen you care with appreciation, getting to know them, even if they may not know the task, there's going to be something in the back of their mind that's going to stop them from maybe doing something wrong.
Yeah, 100%. It may give them and knowing someone out there other than their parents actually care about them, gives them an opportunity to do the right thing when they're confronted with tough choices. Yeah, sure. So that's good stuff. What else you want to talk about?
I do have a couple of questions I'll throw out at you. So when it comes to younger airmen that are listening to this episode, and what is a simple and maybe effective tip you can give them on developing their leadership style or traits early on in their career? Because I tell a lot of people, we're all leaders. You don't have to wait till you're senior airman or ALS or NCOA to become a leader. You can lead from day one. What have you seen airmen do, or what are some things you think can be pretty easily implemented?
So I'll tell you something. The first thing I tell everybody that I meet in FTAC or first term airmen. So the first term airmen, within a couple of weeks when they show up on Anderson Air Force Base, I have a meeting with them for about an hour, and I ask them this question: Do you guys know the number one thing that the Air Force values the most? What do you think the number one thing the Air Force values the most?
I want to say time. I feel like that's going to come right.
Now, I'd say that from seeing this thing for the last 35, 40 years, the Air Force, what it values the most is what your immediate supervisor thinks of you. So you got to go into it with an understanding that your immediate supervisor throughout every stage of your career, regardless of where you're at, they control your fate. They're the ones that give you the opportunities that turn into advancement and rank or learning opportunities, those sort of things. They also write your paperwork. So if your paperwork is good because your supervisor thinks high of you, then you usually do better in the Air Force. And if you're doing well in the Air Force, your life is usually better too, at least while you're in the Air Force. So I strongly suggest that let me ask you this. Do you like some of your subordinates more than others? Yeah. So what are the traits in a subordinate that is attractive to you?
For me, and I tell a lot of airmen, it's pretty simple stuff. If you can show up ready to work, is usually going to put you ahead. Personability, being able to be talked to. And now that I've fine-tuned some of these it's the small things that really make a difference to me. Dress and appearance. It can be as simple as what's your inbox like on your email, which is minute, but it can go a long way.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, I look at exactly the same stuff, and I've been doing this thing for probably 3 times as long as you have. It's the airmen that are squared away, the airmen that work hard, that are hungry to learn. They're professionally inquisitive, I guess, to try to make themselves better each and every day. And that's the same thing every supervisor looks for. An airman that is just is just the epitome of what you think an awesome airman would look like. So when I'm talking to the young folks, I'd say that be that airman. And if you're not that airman now, find an airman that's like that. Like I found Captain Lee Apollo, my hero from the past, and in observing the awesome things that I saw in that young officer, I just tried to imitate it for most of my career. And eventually, as you imitate someone that you think is like a great example, it becomes habit, and pretty soon you're not imitating them anymore. It's just who you become. So I would say to an airman that's out there, hey man, find that one airman that you would most like to be like, and then observe them, kind of figure out what the things they're doing that are attractive to you, and then emulate those things.
That's perfect. That's exactly what I've heard on other episodes with, man, you almost said it verbatim as one of the people I had on my episode. They're like, just find someone that's doing better than you and do that. Like
Yeah, exactly.
I tell a lot of people, leadership isn't new. It's not something chaotic. Like all the traits I just mentioned or you mentioned, we didn't just make those up. We saw other people doing them that were successful and leading the way. And we're like, oh, that looks good. How do I take it to my style and adjust it and fit it in and implement it? Like that. And I tell a lot of people, leadership is all about executing with intent on the small details.
Yep.
Like I am huge for airmen. And I tell them like I'll tell airmen all the time, you don't have to do a lot to be extraordinary, right now at the standards. If you just show up a little bit earlier than work, maybe get a couple extra tasks done, be a little bit more in the PT world, maybe balance a couple things, you'll move ahead so much faster.
Oh yeah, 100%. So I'll give you this tip too. This is another thing I tell an airman, and this is something I've been doing for, I don't know, 20, 25 years now, but it took me a while to figure it out. So now every night when I lay my head down to go to sleep, I try to debrief my day, and mainly the interactions that I've had with other people to see where I may have been not perceived in the way that I was attempting to be perceived. And in doing that, you gain some self-awareness, which is pretty important in interactions. Yeah. If you're self-aware, you're probably a leg up on 50% of America. And I'll give you an example of one of the things I caught myself on. I think it was 2021. I was getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan for a year for the Sojidif Levant, and we were in Fort Bragg, taking a bunch of briefings from the folks in CENTCOM, and one of the people that briefed us was a SOCCENT POLAD, so a State Department lady that worked directly in SOCCENT, which is Special Operations Command CENTCOM. So, and at the end of that briefing, she was like an amazing briefer. I walked out of there. I was a 1-star general at the time, and I said, "Man, that's a pretty young gal, or for being as smart as she is, that's a pretty young gal." And when I laid my head down, I kind of thinking, well, that could have been perceived a couple of different ways. The way I intended it was, well, that guy's super young and super smart. But it could also be perceived as a creepy old man going, that's a pretty young gal. You know what I'm saying? So those are the kind of things that as you reflect on it, you can tweak and make the next interaction, that much better.
Also think debriefing is something we don't do enough of. Like being a flyer, you've seen it. We debrief all the time. You debrief your sortie, you learn, you fix your mistakes. When I was the flight commander AFEO in the OSS a few years ago, that was the one thing I tried to bring from the flying community to the enlisted airman side is debrief what you're doing, because that will help you so much more. And because I didn't see a lot of it in their workshop, because they're always, going through the day. And I was like, guys, if you want to not make these same mistakes and learn from each other, have some constructive debriefs, like you've probably been there when you're on a debrief, there's no rank in the room. I've flown with wing commanders before where I'm like, hey, sir, you messed up on this. And they're like, yep, copy, check. I won't do it again there. I'm like, cool. Like debrief is something I try to bring to those outside the flying community. And I've seen some good impact from that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think you learn more in a good debrief than you do in a good flight. So when everybody are sitting down and the gloves are off and you got a guy that's kind of wearing you out because we're too fast on approach, and he's kind of screwed him at the bottom of the LZ. That's where you learn, and I think that you're right. That's something that could be implemented not just in the non-aviation parts of the Air Force, but industry anywhere. That's where the magic happens. That's why America is the best in the world at fighting war, is because we debrief. I bet you those Russians don't debrief like we do. If they did, they'd probably be doing a lot better in Ukraine right now.
The next question I have, how do you help airmen eliminate the fear of doubt when they're taking on these new challenging, opportunities? Because we all know the fear of doubt is such a killer in so many people, just from stopping them from even starting anything important in their life. So, do you have an example, or what would you say is a good way to approach that?
So, right, I mean, so my background, I've gone through a bunch of different lives, right? So I started out as a helicopter door gunner, and then I became a helicopter pilot flying as a warrant officer for the Army. And then I went over and became an Air Force Special Operations pilot. So the question is why? Why did I do that? And we kind of talked about your decision making process, and you kind of said you collaborate with your wife. You talk about going to be a stow or cross into the special tactics world, um, which is pretty cool. And so your process may be kind of like mine. When I'm going to do something different than what I'm doing, pretty much 100% of the time, it's based on one thing: is the thing that I want to do cooler than what I'm doing right now? So I go through life just analyzing if there's something that's cooler out there that can be done by me, then I want to go do that. And I tell my airmen is that, hey, my goal for all of our airmen out here is at the end of their lives, I want them to be 99 years old, laying in their deathbed, and I want them to shoot up and go, "That was awesome," and then die. I want them to look back on their life and just have it be an awesome life. So I think that every airman out there, every person can do more than they're doing. And probably the biggest limiting factor is just the decision to do it. So I'd say be bold. Be bold with your life. And I told my kids the same thing. I said, hey, what I want for you guys, I want you guys to figure out what you think is the coolest thing to do with your life and just go do that. Because if you do that, at the end of it, you're going to be, that was awesome. A whole life full of cool experiences. Um, that's the best part of life. You talked a little bit about balance earlier. So I think probably when I was your age and younger, I probably traded off a lot of moments with my family in striving for going to do the coolest stuff I could do. And I regret that. My kids still turned out okay. And I look back, I don't regret, other than the time with the kids, a single decision that I've made. It's been a great life.
I think you hit it on the head. Be bold. I'm a big fan of just do hard things, right? Just go out there and do hard things.
Yep.
You said it. We are way more capable than we think we are. Like I was telling you earlier when I take these airmen on rucks, and we do 15, 20, 30 miles, they'll get done and be like, that's the craziest thing I've ever did. I'm like, yeah, and what's crazier is you can do more.
You can do more, yeah. Yeah, so I got two, probably huge character flaws. The first one is my whole life is driven on doing something cooler than I'm doing right now. And the second one is I got a pathological fear of failure. So the first one gets me in a tight spot, and the second one gets me through it because I'll do whatever it takes not to fail. And one of the techniques I use, especially when I'm doing military type training or moving up to the next level on something, is I'll try to find someone in my cohort that I think is dumber than me. And I'll tell myself, if that person can do it, I can definitely do this. So you try to find, you don't got to be first. You just don't want to be last. And making sure that you don't lose out to someone that you don't think is as squared away as you are. It's a pretty good motivating factor for me.
One of the other traits I have, it's usually one that's brought up after with all my lists, is always be learning. And I love it. I love to read. I love to do that. When did you, develop this skill of always be learning, or, how does that work in your career? And how can you tell airmen there's ways to be learning outside of your job to get better? That's what I've always come with feedback. People, they're like, oh, I'm trying to work on my job. I'm like, yeah, but there's other ways to get better at your job, but without focusing on your job.
Yeah, I'd say that's 100% right. And I tell you this, I started out late in the learning thing. I was kind of a savage when I grew up. Single mom. She was a travel agent. We obviously weren't super wealthy, but she did everything she could to provide for us. So I love her for that. But I was basically unsupervised for most of my youth, and because of that, I ran wild. So I was pretty much of a wild kid. So my learning in life really didn't begin, I would say, until I joined the Army, and those guys kind of got that wildness sorted out of me, and then I kind of started learning. And also just, making a couple of stripes in the Army kind of gave me a little more confidence and self-worth than I had originally, because I thought I was just going to be a scumbag like most of the people that I knew. But having the opportunity that the Army gave me, I would not be here without that. Just to have someone, some strong people getting a guy that was out of control back in control. So that's the first thing. You got to kind of sort yourself out behavioral wise. And once I did that, I could begin the journey of learning that you talk about. I didn't really attend high school, so I pretty much skipped it. And now I got 3 master's degrees, and I don't particularly like school, but the things that I wanted to do with my life made the book learning through school necessary. Because in order to accomplish it, I had to have a degree to get commissioned. I had to get a master's degree to make colonel. So some of the things that drive me education wise is just the opportunities that it opens and what happens if you don't get it. Does that make sense?
It does. And I tell a lot of airmen, and I've said it on some of my social media platforms, every airman should be thinking of commissioning. And I'll get, feedback of like, well, what if I want to be a chief or that? I'm like, the thing is, when you think of commissioning, you're already putting yourself above those who aren't. So you're psychologically excelling in where you want to be in life because you're going to work on a degree. And then who knows, maybe by the time you get to chief, you still want to become an officer, and you still can. And that's what you're talking about. You gotta put those, the ladder a little bit higher than where you want to go, and you'll get there.
So I bumped into this guy. I had a huge slip and slide at my house a couple months ago. So it's like a 400-foot slip and slide that you kind of go down on a boogie board made of tarps. And you probably get going maybe 15, 20, 30 mile an hour down that thing. So it's a pretty good hill. So I had invited the whole wing over, and I was out talking to a senior airman, not even a senior airman. He's a A1C. And it turns out this guy was from South Chicago, a very soft-spoken, probably the most beautiful black man I've ever laid eyes on. Just a good-looking guy, built. He's kind of built, got arms like you. He's does MMA, but super soft-spoken, just impressive young man. And I was talking to him, and the guy just kind of, you're a leader in the Air Force, right? You ever just talking to an airman and you just see that a special spark in him that not every airman has? Yeah. So this guy had that spark. So I started talking about what he wants to do with his life, and would he consider commissioning? And he's like, yeah, maybe. I said, hey, how about I put you in for this lead program, and you go to the Air Force Academy, because he was young enough to do it, and he agreed to do it. So we got his application in, and I'm looking forward to sending this guy that grew up in South Chicago go to the greatest college on the planet, the United States Air Force Academy, and become an officer. So if that guy can do it, coming from where he came from, every airman out there can do it.
One of the things I remembered you said earlier is the appreciation thing, and it reminded me of Napoleon. So I don't know if you ever heard, but Napoleon, when he was general, he would make awards for a lot of his people and just like make these ribbons and bring them out to him and appreciate everybody out there on the front line. And it made me think of that when you said you were coining people and recognizing them.
Yeah, so Napoleon used to say, with enough tin and ribbon, I could take over the world. Because just those small things. And I've met other senior officers that are kind of miserly with the awards and that sort of thing. And I just don't understand it. I mean, those awards don't cost me anything. And it's like, well, you're denigrating the award. I mean, nobody knows what the guy got the award for. So you want to hear a story about that? So about I guess it was at Hurlburt Field, and the whole Air Force was having trouble with people running the gate, right? So I went down and talked to the security forces guys, and I said, hey, if you guys stop a gate runner using the barrier, because they were kind of hesitant to push the button on the barrier, afraid the car's going to crash into it. I said, I will give you an award, right? And sure enough, probably about a week after that, this chief ran the gate that was visiting, ran the south gate down by the sound side of Hurlburt. And the guy hit the button and trapped her in the circle. So the very next day, I had that guy come up to the wing headquarters during the wing staff meeting, and I put an achievement medal on him. So and that got people pretty excited about pushing that button. So you can drive a lot of great behaviors just by recognizing people that do awesome stuff.
Well, sir, I'll keep you on the time limit here. What's a book you wanted to bring for those to get some learning, and then I'll bring the one I got as well.
Yeah, mine's an old school one, but I still go back and read it every now and again. Because it gives you a little bit more of the emotional quotient that some people are lacking, and it's how to win friends and influence people. So I don't know how long it's been since you've read that book. Yeah. The thing is probably 40 years old now, and it's probably only about like yay thick. It's probably a half an inch thick, But I'd highly recommend that people read that book. And if you read it a long time ago, read it again, because it really teaches you the things that you were supposed to learn in kindergarten, which is how to get along with people. And whether you're a supervisor or a subordinate, whether you're a general officer or a brand new airman, that thing has got some skills in that. There's some gold in that book that you can implement in your life and make it better every day.
I think Dale Carnegie is the author of it. Great book.
That's right.
I've read it a couple of times as well. The book I'm bringing to the table, and you've already mentioned a bunch of concepts in it, was Turn the Ship Around. A great book. And, the Air Force is sort of leaning towards that concept that he talks about in that book, that leader. We've coined the term mission command, which is really implementing that top down or that bottom up leadership. And you've already hit a bunch of it on this episode. Hey, if you give them the trust, they'll work for you. We've talked about, hey, trying to work to the level above you, building relationships. And that, it just reminded me that whole time you were talking was I just finished like last week, and we're doing a book reading actually for my ops group. Our chief of the group put out an email. He's like, hey guys, let's do a book reading club. And so we're in that right now. And that's awesome. What it reminded me of. Yeah,
I haven't read that one, so I'm writing it down. I'll go get that one as soon as we check out of here. Maybe I can get it on the internet.
Well, with that being said, sir, I appreciate your time. Is there any last parting shots you have for the masses before you start your day?
I just say this. For all the airmen and the civilian airmen that are out there, hey man, thank you guys. Thank you so much for your service. Thank you for making all the cuts, kind of like we described, Manuel and making here. From a guy that really actually, after about doing this for about 40 years, that knows exactly what you all do for a living. On behalf of a grateful nation and an old man, thank you guys. It's really appreciated.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for those that are listening. And if you listen, I say it all the time, please save, share, like, and follow. We're just getting started, finishing up year one of the podcast and getting ready for year two.